Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald and experienced robes stood there. She had a completely stern face, and Harry's first concept became that this become not someone to cross. The first years, Professor McGonagall, said Hagrid. Thanks, Hagrid. I can take them from right here. She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall became so huge you could have fit the complete of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone partitions have been lit with flaming torches just like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling turned into too excessive to make out, and an awesome marble staircase dealing with them brought about the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall throughout the flagged stone ground. Harry should listen the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The relaxation of the college must already be here, but Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small, empty chamber off the corridor. They crowded in, standing as an alternative closer collectively than they might typically have performed, peering about nervously. Welcome to Hogwarts, said Professor McGonagall. The start of time period. Banquet will start quickly, but earlier than you're taking your seats within the Great Hall, you will be looked after into your homes. The sorting is a completely important ceremony. Because even as you are here, your property might be something like your family within Hogwarts. You may have instructions with the rest of your own home, sleep in your residence dormitory, and spend loose time in your private home common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Every residence has its personal noble history, and every has produced exceptional witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule-breaking will lose residence points. At the quit of the year, the house with the most factors is offered the Residence Cup, a awesome honor. I hope every of you will be a credit score to whichever residence will become yours. The sorting ceremony will take area in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I endorse you all smarten yourselves up as much as you may. While you are waiting. Her eyes lingered for a second on Neville's cloak, which changed into fastened beneath his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. I shall go back while we're prepared for you, said Professor McGonagall. Please wait quietly. She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. How precisely do they type us into houses? He asked Ron. A few kind of check, I think. Fred stated it hurts loads, but I think he became joking. Harry's heart gave a terrible jolt. Take a look at? In front of the complete school? However, he didn't know any magic, but what in the world would he ought to do? He hadn't expected something like this the instant they arrived. He regarded around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified, too. No one turned in to speak me. A lot besides Hermione Granger, who become whispering very fast approximately all of the spells she'd found out and wondering which one she'd want. Harry attempted hard no longer to concentrate to her. He'd in no way been greater apprehensive, by no means, not even when he'd had to take a faculty record domestic to the Dursleys announcing that he'd by some means became his instructor's wig blue. He saved his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall might come returned and lead him to his doom. Then something befell that made him leap approximately a foot within the air. Several humans behind him screamed. What the? He gasped. So did the humans around him. Approximately 20 ghosts had just streamed via the lower back wall, pearly white and slightly obvious. They glided throughout the room, speak me to one another and rarely glancing at the first years they regarded to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk became announcing. Forgive and forget about, I say, we ought to deliver him a 2D danger. My dear friar, haven't we given Peeves all of the chances he merits? He offers us all a bad call and you realize, he's no longer simply even a ghost. I say, what? Are you all doing right here? A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. No one replied. New students, said the Fats Friar, smiling round at them. Approximately to be looked after, I think? A few people nodded mutely. Desire to see you in Hufflepuff, said the Friar. My vintage residence, you realize. Pass along now, said a sharp voice. The sorting rites approximately to begin. Professor McGonagall had back. Separately, the ghosts floated away through the other wall. Now, shape a line, Professor McGonagall instructed the first years, and comply with me. Feeling oddly as even though his legs had grew to become to steer, Harry were given into line. At the back of a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the corridor, and via a couple of double doors into the first-rate corridor. Harry had never even imagined such an odd and splendid location. It became lit by using lots and heaps of candles that had been floating in midair over 4 lengthy tables, in which the rest of the students were sitting. Those tables had been laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. On the pinnacle of the corridor became some other lengthy table where the lecturers had been sitting. Professor McGonagall led the primary years up right here, so they came to a halt in a line, dealing with the other college students, with the instructors behind them. The hundreds of faces gazing them gave the impression of pale lanterns inside the flickering candlelight. Dotted right here and there many of the college students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Particularly to keep away from all of the staring eyes, Harry seemed upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to appear to be the sky out of doors. I study approximately it in Hogwarts, records." It was hard to trust there was a ceiling there at all, and that the splendid hall didn't without a doubt open onto the heavens. Harry fast seemed down once more as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in the front of the primary years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely grimy. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have allowed it in the residence. Perhaps they had to try to get a rabbit out of it, Harry notioned wildly, that regarded the form of factor, noticing that everyone in the corridor changed into now. Watching the hat, he stared at it, too. For some seconds, there was whole silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened huge like a mouth. And the hat began to sing. "Oh, you can no longer suppose I'm pretty, however don't judge on what you spot, I'll devour myself if you could discover a smarter hat than me. You could keep your bowlers black, your pinnacle hats smooth and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat. And I'm able to cap them all. There's nothing hidden to your head, the sorting hat can't see, so attempt me on and I will let you know where you ought to be. You may belong in Gryffindor, in which dwell the brave at coronary heart, their daring, nerve and chivalry. Set Gryffindors aside, you would possibly belong in Hufflepuff, where they are simply unloyal, the ones affected person Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil, or yet insensible antique Ravenclaw, if you've a geared-up mind, wherein those of wit and mastering will constantly discover their type, or perhaps in Slytherin. You'll make your actual buddies, those foxy folk use any means to achieve their ends. So positioned me on. Don't be afraid. And don't get in a flap. You're in secure palms, even though I've none. For I'm a thinking cap." The complete corridor burst into applause, because the hat finished its track. It bowed to each of the 4 tables, and then have become pretty nonetheless again. "So we've simply got to try on the hat," Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred," he changed into taking place approximately wrestling a troll. Harry smiled weakly. Sure. Attempting at the hat became loads better than having to do a spell, however he did want they may have tried it on without everybody looking. The hat appeared to be asking rather plenty. Harry didn't experience brave or short-witted or any of it in the meantime. If only the hat had sighted a house. For folks that felt a piece queasy, that might were the only for him. Professor McGonagall now improved, holding an extended roll of parchment. Once I name your name, you may place on the hat and take a seat at the stool to be sorted, she stated. Abbott, Hannah, a pink-faced female with blonde pigtails, stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff, shouted the hat. The table at the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff desk. Harry saw the ghost of the Fats Friar waving merrily at her. Bones, Susan! Hufflepuff, shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to take a seat. Subsequent to Hannah. Boot, Terry. Ravenclaw. The desk second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst, Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, however Brown, Lavender had become the primary new Gryffindor, and the table on the a long way left exploded with cheers. Harry should see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode, Millicent then had become a Slytherin. Perhaps it turned into Harry's creativeness, after all he'd heard about Slytherin, but he idea they looked like an unsightly lot. He changed into beginning to sense truly unwell now. He remembered being picked for groups during gymnasium at his vintage faculty. He had usually been final to be chosen, no longer due to the fact he become no good, however, due to the fact nobody wanted Dudley to assume they liked him. Finch Fletchley, Justin. Hufflepuff. Every now and then, Harry observed, the hat shouted out the house right away, but at others it took a little while to determine. Finnegan, Seamus, the sandy-haired boy, next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost an entire minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione. Hermione nearly ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor, shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible notion struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do whilst you're very worried. What if he wasn't chosen in any respect? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for a long time, till Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had glaringly been a mistake and he'd better get lower back on the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, changed into known as, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to determine with Neville. While it subsequently shouted, Gryffindor, Neville ran off still carrying it, and needed to jog back amid gales of laughter to provide it to McDougal, Morag. Malfoy swaggered ahead whilst his call became referred to as and were given his wish at. As soon as the hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin. Malfoy went to enroll in his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many human beings left now. Moon, Knott, Parkinson, then a couple of dual ladies, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally Ann, after which, at remaining, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers abruptly broke out like little hissing fires all around the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? The last aspect Harry saw earlier than the hat dropped over his eyes changed into the corridor complete of humans craning to get an awesome have a look at him. Next second he became looking on the black inner of the hat. He waited. Stated a small voice in his ear. Hard, very hard. Lots of braveness, I see. Not a horrific mind both. There's skills, and my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to show yourself. Now that's interesting, so wherein shall I put You? Harry gripped the edges of the stool and concept, now not Slytherin, not Slytherin. No longer Slytherin, stated the small voice. Are you positive? You may be. Outstanding, you know, it's all right here in your head, and Slytherin will assist you on the way to greatness, no doubt approximately that, no? Properly, if you're positive, better be. Gryffindor. Harry heard the hat shout the ultimate word to the whole corridor. He took off the hat and walked shakily in the direction of the Gryffindor desk. He became so relieved to have been selected and not installed Slytherin, he hardly ever noticed that he changed into getting the loudest cheer, but Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, whilst the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We were given Potter!" Harry sat down opposite the ghost within the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden, terrible feeling he'd just plunged it right into a bucket of ice-cold water. He may want to see the high table properly now. At the quit nearest him sat Hagrid, who stuck his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned, returned. And there, in the center of the excessive table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry diagnosed him straight away from the card he'd gotten out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair turned into the only aspect inside the complete hall that shone as brightly because the ghosts. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the fearful young man from the leaky cauldron. He become looking very abnormal in a large crimson turban. And now there had been only 3 people left to be looked after. Thomas, Dean. A black boy even taller than Ron, joined Harry at the Gryffindor table. Turpin, Lisa, became a Ravenclaw and then it turned into Ron's turn. He became faded, inexperienced by now. Harry crossed his hands below the table and a 2D later the hat had shouted, "Gryffindor." Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well completed, Ron." "Brilliant," said Percy Weasley pompously throughout Harry. As Zabini, Blaze, turned into made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry regarded down at his empty gold plate. He had most effective just found out how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties appeared a while ago. Albus Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He became beaming at the students, his fingers opened huge, as if nothing may want to have thrilled him greater than to look them all there. "Welcome," he stated. "Welcome to a brand new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our ceremonial dinner, I would like to say a few phrases. And here they may be: nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you." He sat go into reverse. Everyone clapped and cheered. Harry didn't understand whether to chuckle or no longer. "Is he a piece mad?" he requested Percy uncertainly. "Mad," stated Percy airily. "He's a genius. High-quality wizard in the global. However, he is a piece mad, sure." "Potatoes, Harry?" Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in the front of him had been now piled with food. He had never visible so many things he favored to eat on one table: roast beef, roast chook, red meat chops and lamb chops, sausages, baron and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, fries, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and, for some unusual reason, peppermint humbugs. The Dursleys had by no means precisely starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to consume as a whole lot as he preferred. Dudley had constantly taken something that Harry surely wanted, although it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a chunk of everything besides the peppermints and began to eat. It turned into all delicious. "That does appearance correct," stated the ghost within the ruff regrettably, watching Harry cut up his steak. "Can't you?" I haven't eaten for almost 500 years, stated the ghost. I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't suppose I've outed myself? Sir. Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington at your provider. Resident ghost of Gryffindor. Tower. I recognize who you are, said Ron. My brothers instructed me about you, you're nearly headless Nick. I might prefer you to name me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy, the ghost. Commenced stiffly, however sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. Almost headless? How are you going to be nearly headless? Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as though their little chat wasn't going at all the way he desired. Like this, he said irritably. He seized his left ear and pulled. His complete head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as though it changed into on a hinge. A person had manifestly tried to behead him, however not accomplished it well. Looking thrilled at the shocked looks on their faces, almost headless Nick flipped his head lower back onto his neck, coughed, and said, So, new Gryffindors. I am hoping you're going to assist us win the house championship this year? Gryffindors have in no way long past see you later without winning. Slytherins have got the cup 6 years in a row. The Bloody Baron's turning into nearly unbearable, he's the Slytherin ghost. Harry regarded over on the Slytherin desk and saw a horrible ghost sitting there, with blank staring eyes, a gaunt face, and gowns stained with silver blood. He was proper subsequent to Malfoy who, Harry turned into pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. How did he get protected in blood? Asked Seamus with brilliant interest. I've in no way asked, stated nearly headless Nick delicately. While everybody had eaten as a whole lot as they could, the remains of the meals faded from the plates, leaving them glowing smooth as earlier than a second later. The cakes were guarded, blocks of ice cream in every taste you could consider, apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs and jam donuts, trifle, strawberries, jello, rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to a treacle tart, the talk became to their households. I'm half of and half of, said Seamus. Me dad's a muggle. Mom didn't tell him she changed into a witch till after they were married. Bit of an unpleasant surprise for him. The others laughed. What about you, Neville, stated Ron. Well, my gran added me up and he or she's a witch, said Neville, however the family thought I used to be all muggle for ages. My exceptional Uncle Algy saved looking to catch me off my guard and pressure some magic out of me. He pushed me off the stop of Blackpool Pier as soon as I almost drowned, however not anything befell till I was 8. Top-notch Uncle Algy came spherical for dinner, and he was striking me out of an upstairs window by way of the ankles while my top-notch Auntie Enid supplied him a meringue and he by chance let go. But I bounced all of the way down the garden and into the road. They have been all clearly pleased. Gran changed into crying, she became so happy. And you have to have visible their faces after I got in here, they concept I won't be magic sufficient to return, you notice. Extraordinary Uncle Algy turned into so thrilled he sold me my toad. On Harry's different facet, Percy Weasley and Hermione have been speak me approximately. Instructions, I do desire they start right away, there's so much to learn, I'm particularly interested by transfiguration, you understand, turning something into something else, of course, it's presupposed to be very hard, you'll be starting small, just fits into needles and that type of element. Harry, who beginning to experience heat and sleepy, looked up at the excessive desk again. Hagrid become consuming deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was speaking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, changed into speaking to an instructor with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow pores and skin. It happened very. The hook-nosed teacher appeared past Quirrell's turban directly into Harry's eyes, and a sharp Warm pain shot throughout the scar on Harry's forehead. Ouch. Harry clapped a hand to his head. What's it? Requested Percy. And nothing. The ache had long gone as quick as it had come. More difficult to shake off, changed into the feeling Harry had gotten from the trainer's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry in any respect. Who's that instructor? Speak me to Professor Quirrell, he requested Percy. Oh, you understand Quirrell already, do you? No surprise he's searching so anxious. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't need to. Absolutely everyone knows he's after Quirrell's process. Is aware of an lousy lot about the dark arts, Snape. Harry watched Snape for a while, however Snape didn't examine him again. At final, the desserts too disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet again. The corridor fell silent. Ahem, only a few greater words now that we are all fed and watered. I have some start of time period notices to present you. First years have to word that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all scholars, and some of our older students could do properly to understand that is properly. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the course of the Weasley twins. I have also been asked through Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic must be used among instructions in the corridors. Quidditch trials might be held in the second week of the time period. Absolutely everyone inquisitive about gambling for his or her residence groups need to touch Madam Hooch. And in the end, I have to tell you that this year, the 1/3 ground corridor at the right-hand side is out of bounds to each person who does now not want to die a very painful loss of life. Harry laughed, however he was one of the few who did. He's now not severe, he muttered to Percy. Should be, stated Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's abnormal, due to the fact he commonly gives us a purpose why we're no longer allowed to head someplace, the woodlands. Full of risky beasts, anyone is aware of that. I do think he may have informed us. Prefects, as a minimum. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the college music, cried Dumbledore. Harry observed that the opposite instructor's smiles had turned out to be instead fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a touch flick, as if he become trying to get a fly off the cease, and a protracted golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose excessive above the tables and twisted itself, snake-like, into phrases. All people select their favored track, said Dumbledore, and rancid we cross. And the school bellowed. Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy-Warty Hogwarts, educate us something please, whether we be vintage and bald or young with scabby knees, our heads ought to do with filling with a few thrilling stuff, for now they're bare and complete of air, lifeless flies and bits of fluff, so train us things worth knowing, convey returned what we forgot, just do your excellent, we'll do the rest, and examine till our brains all rot. All of us finished the track at specific times. At last, only the Weasley twins have been left making a song alongside to a completely sluggish funeral march. Dumbledore performed their previous couple of lines along with his wand, and after they had completed, he was one among folks that clapped loudest. Ah, tune, he stated, wiping his eyes. A magic beyond all we do right here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot. The Gryffindor first years accompanied Percy through the chattering crowds, out of the amazing hall, and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs had been like lead. Again, however, best due to the fact he changed into so tired and complete of food. He changed into too sleepy even to be surprised that the humans in the photos alongside the corridors whispered and pointed as they handed, or that 2 times Percy led them via doors hidden in the back of sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed greater staircases, yawning and dragging their FT, and Harry changed into simply questioning how tons farther they had to go once they came to a surprising halt. A package of strolling sticks became floating in midair ahead of them, and as Percy took a step in the direction of them. They started throwing themselves at him. Peeves, Percy whispered to the primary years. A poltergeist. He raised his voice. Peeves, show yourself. A noisy, impolite sound, just like the air being let loose of a balloon, answered. Do you want me to visit the Bloody Baron? There was a pop, and a touch man with wicked, darkish eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating move-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks. Ooh-hoo, he said, with an evil cackle. Ickle first eyes. What amusing. He swooped at them. They all ducked. Go away, Peeves, or the bear'll pay attention about this, I imply it, barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, losing the strolling sticks on Neville's head. They heard him zooming away, rattling coats of armor as he passed. You need to watch out for Peeves, said Percy, as they spark off once more. The Bloody Baron's the most effective one that can manipulate him. He gained even concentrate too. Us prefects. Here we are. On the very cease of the hall hung a portrait of a completely fat female in a red silk get dressed. Password, she said. Caput Draconis, stated Percy, and the portrait swung ahead to show a round hollow within the wall. They all scrambled via it. Neville wished a leg up. And located themselves in the Gryffindor, not unusual room, a cozy, spherical room. Complete of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls via one door to their dormitory and the boys via some other. On the top of a spiral staircase, they had been glaringly in one of the towers. They discovered their beds at remaining 5-4 posters hung with deep pink, velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been introduced up. Too tired to talk. Lots, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. First-rate food, isn't it? Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. Get off, Scabbers. He's chewing my sheets. Harry changed into going to ask Ron if he'd had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost immediately. Possibly Harry had eaten a chunk too much, because he had a totally atypical dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which saved Speak Me to him, telling him he'd have to transfer to Slytherin immediately, as it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't need to be in Slytherin, it were given heavier and heavier. He tried to drag it off, however it tightened painfully, and there was Malfoy, giggling at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy changed into the hook-nosed instructor, Snape, whose chortle had become excessive and cold. There was a burst of inexperienced light and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again, and while he woke next day, he didn't keep in mind the dream in any respect.